The inability to begin a new journey is a very common and relatable experience. Whether it's starting a big personal project, booting up a new massive open world RPG, or even a hobby, we go to take that first step and it feels like our feet are glued to the floor. We're so quick to give up on our dreams and our interests, and as a consequence, we potentially miss out on something that could have brought us a level of fulfillment that we have never known. But despite the vast majority having at least some sort of trouble with the act of getting started, many of us do not fully understand what causes us to freeze and how we can overcome our struggles. So today, I want to talk about the difficulty I've had with getting started, all the years I've wasted away, and hopefully hearing my stories will help you decide what to do about yours. To start things off, I think it's important to identify why we are bad at taking that first step to begin with, before we can figure out what we can do about it. So I spent some time thinking about all of the excuses and reasons I've used in the past to justify my paralysis at the starting line. And I think I've nailed it down to three distinct categories. The first, and arguably the most common one, being procrastination. It's the idea that I totally have everything under control. I don't need to rush into a new workout program, for example, because I'm already feeling pretty good, and my weight isn't too bad. Besides, I don't even have a schedule yet, and I definitely have to work on that before I hastily commit to a new routine. You can't forget that I'm a husband and a father as well, and driving to the gym is just not reasonable. But it's fine, I can just work out at home. But the program I want to do uses a bunch of different equipment, so I'll have to wait on this for a bit longer while I purchase what I need. However, it looks like this stuff is more expensive than I thought. I'll have to design a savings plan at some point in order to get what I need. I'll check on this again in a few weeks and see if I'm in a better spot. Meanwhile, several months have passed and nothing has happened, because the more I pushed off that new workout goal, the more difficult it became to take that first actionable step. That very first bit of resistance we feel towards something creates this shallow hole underneath our feet. The longer we wait, the wider the hole becomes, and every excuse we come up with along the way is another shovel of dirt that gets tossed out. Over a long enough period of time, where you inevitably end up is in the middle of a crater so massive that you can't even see its walls. And even if you could, climbing out of it seems just as equally impossible. Procrastination is probably the most common issue when it comes to getting started on something, simply because the consequences of not taking that first action are a bit less painful. There's this aspect of false hope to it that works as a way to counterbalance the shame or disappointment you hold on to every time you push something off. Like, I feel bad that I didn't work out today, but at least I get to try again tomorrow or next week, knowing that I won't really be punished for it too harshly either way. Now, to expand upon this even further, the second category I think we should talk about is our unrelenting attraction towards where we want to be rather than how we actually get there. We often stumble upon this fear of not reaching the finish line, and therefore feeling like we're going to waste our time. Maybe you're fairly new to World of Warcraft, for example, and have been playing the War Within for the past few months, but you want to give Classic a try, with the goal of raiding at level 60. Before you boot up the game, you decide to watch a couple of "Is Classic WoW Worth Playing?" videos, and quickly realize that this new quest you wish to embark on will take a couple hundred hours just to hit the level cap. And at that moment, you swiftly uninstall the Classic client and get back into retail. Or maybe you have an interest in writing and develop a dream of becoming an author, but you make the mistake of sitting at your desk and telling yourself, "I'm going to write a book." And the second you start writing that first chapter, you immediately become paralyzed by the realization that this endeavor could take several months or even years to complete. You close your laptop and walk away from something potentially life-changing. And this is what makes our hyperfocus on goals so detrimental. It tricks us into believing that our biggest dreams, ideas, and interests are just not possible because of what it perceivably takes to reach the destination, even when those goals are totally within our reach with enough dedication and the right systems in place. And the amount of time something might take isn't the only resistance that we run into when it comes to completing the final product. Sometimes we get stuck on starting smaller projects because we convince ourselves that the environment isn't set up properly, or we need to be feeling a certain way, or we need a million other conditions to be active before anything happens. I used to run into this issue all the time with my playthrough channel. To this day, every episode I put together is somewhere around the 1 hour mark in length. And for the longest time, I told myself that I needed that 1 hour block at a minimum before I could press record. If I knew I was going to potentially be interrupted in 30 or 40 minutes, I just wouldn't start. And reflecting back on it now, it is astonishing how many more episodes could have existed. It is time that I will never get back. Now, the final category I want to bring up when it comes to our difficulties with beginning any new endeavor is perhaps the most painful of the three, because choosing not to start due to a fear of social rejection or disapproval is a far more miserable situation to find yourself in. The act of procrastinating might provoke a quick moment of feeling uncomfortable. Our relentless focus on where we want to go can blind us to the part of the journey that really matters. But socially driven forces will break you down every time as you fabricate these scenarios in your mind that haven't even happened yet. There's that fear of what others might think or say about you if you take that first step. As a World of Warcraft player, you may have aspirations of becoming a Keystone Master or a Mythic Raider, but you're afraid of what other players might say to you if you cause a wipe or show up at the bottom of the damage meters. And then from there, you go on to sabotage your self-perception. Every boss you approach is accompanied with thoughts of, I'm not good at this, I'm going to fail, and I'm going to waste my time. Or maybe you're a player that has already approached the raiding or dungeon scene on your own, but want to try looking for a guild to achieve more consistency and find a group of like-minded players to interact with. But you hesitate because you're worried about what those people might think about your personality and your interests. From my personal experience, I can still remember the first YouTube channel I tried to make many years ago, and it was supposed to be kind of similar to what I'm doing right now, taking what I've learned from gaming and my self-improvement journey and sharing it with others. But my mind was plagued with thoughts of negative YouTube comments that never even had a chance to exist, and my body physically cringed with embarrassment from the thought of my friends, family, and coworkers stumbling upon the channel, even though most of them never would by accident, or if they did, they wouldn't care. There have been times where I've even had a fear of no one saying anything at all. When I started posting episodes to my playthrough channel, receiving comments was insanely rare, and I took that silence as an indication that no one was enjoying the content. I wasn't just afraid of what viewers thought about me and what I was doing, but frustration came into the mix quite often as well, with feedback to help improve my craft being absent. All of these feelings are completely normal to have, but are understandably very difficult to deal with. When you procrastinate, you only have to contend with yourself, which can be rough sometimes, but at least you already kinda know what you're dealing with. But as soon as we bring in other people, especially if we don't know them, we don't have anything to go on. So many different variables appear all of a sudden as we step into unfamiliar territory. You become scared of what the future may hold, and that is not a fun place to be. Now that I've talked about why we have trouble starting something new, you're probably wondering what we're supposed to do about all of these scenarios. Procrastination, our focus on results rather than the systems, and social anxiety are all things that I go through far too often to this day. But I have tried dozens of different strategies in the past to help mend my relationship with getting started, and I've been able to stumble upon a few for each category that really helped me to get out of the holes that I dug myself into. If you find yourself struggling with procrastination more than anything else, it's probably because you already know what the first few actionable steps are towards your goal. You just don't want to do them for one reason or another. So naturally, to fight back against this resistance that we have, let's put a focus on making those first few steps fun to do and rewarding to complete. I think now is a good time to note that simply boosting your level of willpower or discipline on command can be a very good thing when you're looking to fight off procrastination. But these pillars of mental fortitude often require a great deal of energy to fuel, a level of energy that not everyone is going to have when they take on a big new project or goal for the first time. Let's take the millions of people out there who have a desire to lose weight, because I feel like most of us have been there at least once. And for the vast majority, this is what those first few actionable steps would look like based on what most of them perceive to be the requirements for reaching their goal. I have to wake up at 5 a.m. and do a really boring workout that will cause a great deal of physical pain and discomfort. When I'm done, I'll spend 20 minutes eating a bland meal that will probably consist of plain chicken breast, broccoli, and brown rice, with nothing other than a pinch of salt. And then I get to go to work. Doesn't that sound awesome? I mean, who wouldn't be filled with copious levels of joy and passion when they go to bed at night, knowing that this was what they had to look forward to every single day? It's no wonder the failure rate for New Year's resolutions is so astronomically high, because no matter what our aspirations are, so many of us assume that the process must be about the pain for the gain. But it doesn't have to be this way. You could play a sport or a game of some kind instead that gets you up and moving. For all my fellow parents out there, rough and tumble play with your kids most definitely counts as exercise, but for some reason, many of us don't see or think about it in that way. Let me tell you, my toddlers are exhausting. But it really helps knowing that I'm not only providing fun for them, but also developing a healthy habit for myself. Or if you insist on going for that run or curling some iron, listen to music or a podcast while you do so. You can also try gamifying your experience by creating custom challenges for your workout, or even find an app out there that will do it for you, giving yourself a path of progression to sink your teeth into. Which brings me to my next point, and that is to ensure that you are properly rewarding yourself for your efforts. In the case of working out, make each rep in your routine or each step in your run count as a currency that you can accumulate and use to purchase custom rewards from a shop that you designed yourself. It sounds like a lot of upfront work, but crafting your own reward setup is incredibly satisfying and honestly kind of addicting once you get started. I've been doing this with all the positive habits that I want to implement. To help cultivate and stick with my writing habit, for example, I'll give myself 1 gold for every 100 words that I write, and I can spend that currency I've created for myself on rewards such as paying for an hour of uninterrupted game time, or giving myself the ability to watch a mindless YouTube video, or allow myself to indulge in something like a sweet treat or an alcoholic beverage. And because I've actually earned these things by making meaningful progress towards my goal, I don't have to feel so bad about indulging in these things a little bit. If you're looking to keep your reward structure a bit more simple though, that's fine too. But again, just make sure it's something that's actually worthwhile and gets you excited. For some people, a donut or a few cookies could very well be more than enough motivation to get that morning workout done. Does eating either of these things cast a vote for the person you no longer wish to be? Yeah, sure it does, but if that goddamn cookie is going to motivate you enough to show up every single day of your life, you are going to be in a significantly better place if you develop that consistency, as opposed to quitting early because you're not strong enough yet to fight off your own resistance. When you're just getting started on anything worth doing, you have to give yourself a chance. And these are a few ways that help you develop the habits necessary to reach your ultimate goal. Now, with that being said, I've got one last thing to note as far as procrastination is concerned, and that is the act of putting yourself on some sort of timer. Procrastination is essentially just another bad habit that we all have, so let's counteract that negative force with a good one. Instead of letting willpower and discipline be the only driving forces to keep you on the path to reaching your goals, making the process fun and rewarding will help take the load off those traits in the beginning and give them a better chance of developing over time. By doing this, you're freeing up some cognitive load to be used elsewhere, and I think putting some of that newfound energy into setting up some good old-fashioned deadlines can help keep yourself on the right path. Another huge reason we all procrastinate is because we believe the priority of the task at hand isn't as high as we need it to be. So, make it a priority. You might have to spend a bit of time triaging and understanding how the hierarchy of priorities is structured in your life, but as far as the free time you get to yourself, whatever amount of time that might be, put this new quest at the top of that list, and don't let anything else get in your way. You're making the process of getting started easier by making it as fun as you possibly can and giving yourself a very satisfying reward to help keep you motivated. Now it's time to sprinkle in some personal accountability. So give yourself some deadlines to meet for the various tasks that make up your journey and make them important to you. Now, everything I've gone over up until this point are all very standard ideas and concepts you've probably heard before, but there is a reason I wanted to go over these in a bit more detail, because these strategies are not only simple and easy to understand and to implement right away, but they can also help with social anxiety and our lack of focus on habits and systems as well. They've been talked about so much over the years that they're considered platitudes at this point, which is why it's easy to forget that they even exist, or to have the belief that there are only a limited number of ways to implement them correctly. At the end of the day, if you don't show up, you don't get anywhere. Find something that genuinely motivates you and push forward. Now, once again, I'm going to follow up procrastination by talking about our focus on goals rather than systems, because they are often very closely related and can feed off of each other in many ways. Something I've come to realize here is that the fear of not finishing or completing a goal is often the biggest pain point. And what I have found works best for me when I manifest this fear is to identify the smallest possible first step, simplify my overall strategy, and then once those two have been identified, I try to determine if these things align with my desired outcome. Nowadays, the vast majority will look towards the 2-minute rule to help identify their first step into any new and unexplored territory. It's easy, reliable, and something that everyone is probably familiar with at this point. Just take a task that you know will contribute towards your overall goal and put 2 minutes towards that task. And what you'll find is that you tend to spend much longer than that. It's a cute little trick that definitely works for many, but I will say, for me personally, I often have trouble correlating that aspect of time with that first actionable step. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense for me depending on what I'm doing. When I start writing for a new video, for example, there will be times where I'll start that stopwatch, and after my 2 minutes are up, there are no words on the page, and that doesn't feel great. So what I do instead is make my first step an actual measurable component of the overall goal. I'm not trying to write a script. I'm trying to write a paragraph. And sometimes that's even too much, so I'll focus it down even further and just work on writing a sentence or two that I really love, even if it's not what I'm going to start the video with. It could very well just be a part of my notes and my outline to use for later. That sentence or two could even inspire other ideas for other sections, or even spark concepts for other videos entirely. And you can apply this same logic to other hobbies as well, such as gaming. Going back to World of Warcraft, playing for 2 minutes isn't really going to do anything for you, but completing that first quest, or running your first heroic dungeon at max level, might. Both can be considered examples of the first possible step on any player's journey, which is what I believe is what the 2-minute rule is trying to accomplish anyway. Taking that first step is a great way to get a quick win to help motivate you, but it also teaches us a valuable lesson about the importance of breaking down larger goals into much more manageable pieces. Identifying as many of these smaller components as possible is what's really going to get you to the finish line. I find it helpful to imagine I'm trying to cross a very large gap. If I try to jump the gap, I'm most certainly not going to make it. I'd end up having to pick myself back up again after falling into the hole to try again. And that next attempt is going to be even more difficult to perform because now I'm beat up and my motivation has taken a big hit. But if I tried to build a bridge instead, it might take much longer than if I were to get lucky and make the jump, but I know I'll eventually guarantee myself safe passage across the gap. And even more importantly still, that bridge will provide value to me at a later date. It's not going anywhere. To get into another real world example, let's say my goal is to get that six pack I've always wanted. It's easy to fall into the trap of I watched 10 videos on YouTube and they all told me I need a few hours worth of workouts nearly every day on top of the shift in diet. It's not exactly difficult to imagine myself giving up on this goal almost immediately, because I don't have time for that, or it seems like an impossible way to live. So I quit before I start, and yet the fantasy of having that perfect body will continue to plague my mind. But what if that first step was to do 10 push-ups a day, or go for a 15-minute walk, and I could feel good about doing those things? What if the week after I combined them together, or added one extra set of something else? These tasks are significantly easier to perform and therefore far more consistent, and ultimately it's that consistency that's going to get me where I need to be. And then once I do start to see results, I'm going to look back on those small wins I set myself up with in the beginning, along with all of the other smaller components I've been putting together on a daily basis, and feel good about that first bridge I just built for myself. Now, while taking the time to simplify your big endeavor into smaller components is helpful for that consistency and for staying motivated, what it can also do is help you identify whether or not that endeavor is even something you wanted to begin with. It took me a long time to realize that sometimes when I get into a new hobby or even a new game, I'm getting exactly what I want out of it without quote unquote finishing it or reaching my goal. And this began happening once I started asking myself, do I actually care about this? Are these first few steps I'm taking helpful or even fun for me? Does my goal need to be as big and as ambitious as I've made it out to be? And often to my surprise, no, it doesn't. If we don't enjoy the process that gets us to our ultimate goal, how can we possibly expect to find joy or fulfillment in that destination? It doesn't make any sense. It's like trying to get rich by playing the lottery. Chances are, it's not going to happen. But even if it does, there have been studies that show that people who win usually end up back where they started after just several months. And it's because they don't have the right systems in place to give them any direction. They don't know where they're going. Money was the initial goal, but it almost always doesn't give those winners what they wanted. And I can only imagine having that realization crushes them. For the WoW players out there, you might have a dream of one day getting cutting edge for a future raid, but you continue to make excuses and come up with reasons for not even giving it a try. However, if you take the first step in that journey, you might quickly realize that you actually don't want that achievement at all, because going after it would force you into playing the game in a way that you didn't even realize you wouldn't enjoy. This is exactly what happened to me back in Legion, where for the longest time, I thought high-end raiding was this incredibly cool and interesting thing that I would never be able to take part in for reason X or Y. But after finally mustering up the courage to start, and eventually getting into my first mythic raid and guild, it took only 2 weeks of progression to realize that I was fantasizing for years about something that I hated. And after this moment, I did my best to catch myself whenever I was trying to finish something that wasn't providing me with some sort of internal value or fulfillment. And if you ultimately decide that the goal you've been dreaming about isn't actually something you want, instead of giving up on it completely, try modifying the destination itself. Because there is nothing wrong with starting a new WoW character, knowing that you'll only have fun for the first 20 levels, and then you'll stop. There's nothing wrong with booting up a game like Skyrim, with the intent of enjoying the music and the ambiance on the way to Whiterun, and then turning off the game again for a long time. There's nothing wrong with playing Tears of the Kingdom just to mess around with Ultra Hand and figure out what you can put together, even if you don't intend to beat the game. You're only wasting your time if you put the work into something that you're not immediately getting anything back from. Now, let's move on to some of the ways I deal with social anxiety and negative self-perception, because dealing with this category is a bit different than the others. It's much more about shifting our mindset and learning to be more open and honest with ourselves. And there's a few options that have always stood out to me, and those include trying to see myself and my scenario through a different lens, cutting myself some slack, and identifying what makes my thoughts about the situation unique to me. When we hesitate to start something new because we're worried about what other people might think, we are immediately self-critical, allowing our flaws to rise to the surface and letting those negative thoughts consume us in the moment. And when you imagine what you'll experience when you get started on this new journey, it's going to feel pretty easy to feel very hopeless about the whole thing. But imagine for a second if your scenario belonged to a close friend or a family member of yours. What if they had the exact same goal, started working on it, and shared their progress with you? Would you feel embarrassed for them? Would you make fun of them or disapprove? No, right? If it's something that they are genuinely interested in exploring, then you would probably be supportive and excited for them. Even if it was something you weren't interested in yourself, at worst you would say something along the lines of, "That's cool, man, I hope it works out." Implementing this simple shift in perspective has helped me unload some of the mental and emotional pressure I've experienced when I'm trying something completely new. But I will admit, sometimes putting myself into someone else's shoes isn't enough, especially if and when those initial bouts of self-criticism lead to comparing myself to others that are far more successful than I am. And the big problem we all have with this line of thinking is we tend to jump to conclusions with little to zero context regarding the people we are comparing ourselves to. So what should we do in this case? Perhaps this may sound a bit crude, but sometimes we all need to remind ourselves to lower that goddamn bar just a little bit before we decide to give up on that new interest. Not everything needs to be a competition, and I can tell you now from my own personal pursuits that there is more than enough room in your desired niche or community. As long as you're focusing on the aspects of your goal that bring you enjoyment and inspiration, then it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing or thinking. And if you can do this, even if you're perceivably bad at whatever it is you're starting, I promise you, it will make everything about that new adventure worth it. And this brings me to my last point regarding these socially driven scenarios, and that is to make sure that we are all putting our own spin on the goal, project, or hobby we're looking to start. Because not only does your personality, your take, and your story actually matter a lot to you, as these things are what provide some of your biggest motivations, but if you end up sharing this interest with others in some way, it's what your community actually cares about as well, because it's your experience that is different from what they have already heard or seen. This idea is very important to me because it directly impacted the existence of this channel and the video that you are watching right now. I was so hesitant to start making these videos because I was getting hung up on the idea that these topics have already been reviewed and elaborated on by hundreds of thousands of other human beings over the course of our history. How many self-improvement videos do you think exist on this platform alone? How many books have been written about it? How many speeches or lectures have been given? If we're being 100% honest here, everything I've outlined in this video so far is completely unoriginal. But here's the thing. Some of you will probably get something out of this video, even if you've heard all of these ideas before. And that is most likely because you were able to connect with one of my personal stories or experiences. Or maybe I provided the insights in a way that just made more sense to you than hearing it from others. Let me lay out another quick example, and tell me if this is something that you've experienced before. You're scrolling through your YouTube feed, and you stumble across a video that you're interested in, and it's 30 minutes long. You grab your earbuds, you press play, and you start doing the dishes. About 10 minutes into the video, you haven't really learned anything new or gotten much out of the experience. But your hands are wet, and you haven't finished washing everything, so you just let the video continue to play for the next 5 to 10 minutes while you finish up. Several minutes go by, and suddenly it happens. You stumble upon 30 seconds of pure gold. Something that gets your mind racing with new ideas and realizations, and it makes the entire video worth it. You could have easily skipped the rest of that video if you had been at your desk or were doing something else, and you would have missed out on this experience. There are times where just a few sentences can flip that switch in your head and give you that aha moment. Those are the moments we're looking for, and they're almost always tied back to that YouTuber's story, experience, or just simply the way they see the world. So don't worry so much about being completely 100% original when it comes to starting something new, because if we're being honest, nothing that exists is. Nearly everything that has ever been created, whether physical or theoretical, was inspired by something or someone else. But it doesn't matter. Just make sure that your story and your unique personality are included and expressed in your quest, whether you are sharing it with the world or not. If I can leave you guys with just one more thing, it's to understand that the cost of not starting is just too goddamn high. I don't know what my life would look like if I didn't get started with YouTube and with writing. I would probably be exactly where I used to be, just mindlessly consuming games without any direction or intent, afraid of wasting my time while simultaneously hoping that the barriers that separate myself and my dreams would just disappear on their own over time. That if I waited long enough, everything would just resolve itself. YouTube has provided a deeper meaning for the games that I've played. It forced me to identify what I truly wanted out of gaming this whole time, and it helped me locate the magic and the fulfillment within the games that I played. First, it was World of Warcraft, and then it became many others. Meanwhile, my writing has given me a way to expand my mind, what I know about the world, and what I know about myself. And with all of this, I get to hear stories from all of you, how your journey is going, where it has taken you, and what you've learned from it. So if there's something out there that you truly want, or at the very least truly want to explore with a genuine interest, identify that first step and take it. Don't get caught in an endless loop of what ifs for the rest of your life. Don't let this be the dream you never chased, the life you never got to live. Do not abandon the person you want to become. You can do this. The best time to start is right now, so get to it. That's it for me today. As always, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.